Welcome, and thank you all for being with us today. It is so great to see the turnout again today. We've had a really great turnout for the webinars we've been doing, and I think that really indicates that we need this personal connection and that we're all seeking a lot of answers as we move through this coronavirus, through these challenging times together. First and foremost, we do hope that you and your families and your colleagues are all healthy and staying safe and sane as you self-isolate at home, at least for the most part. And while the participants on this call are dealing with the specifics of their own situations, I think we can assume they're all pretty devastating at the moment. Knowing that none of us has a crystal ball to predict the future, we felt like the next best thing was to get the insights straight from the leading travel expert, Peter Greenberg. Known in the travel industry as the travel detective, Peter Greenberg is America's most recognized, honored, and respected frontline travel news journalist. He's won a number of Emmys and awards for his work as an investigative reporter and producer. Among his many other honors, Peter was named by Travel Weekly as one of the most influential people in travel, along with Bill Marriott and Sir Richard Branson. And he was inducted into the U.S. Travel Association's Hall of Leaders for his contributions to the travel industry. We're fortunate to have Peter with us today to share his insight into the impact of the coronavirus on the travel industry. And Peter, I really want to thank you for taking time to be with us today. We do have a number of questions that were submitted by some of the participants on today's call. And I think the overriding request was just to get your overall insight on what's happening. What does the outlook for the future of travel overall look like, particularly for this industry of international inbound, which is, definitely closed off right now with all of the air travel stop and the travel bans. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you address the situation and tell us what your insight is.
Well, Lisa, first, thanks for having me. But in all truth, I had nowhere else to go. But all kidding aside, I send everybody greetings from my bunker here in Manhattan. If you hear an occasional siren behind me, it's because I'm only located 3 blocks from the field hospital that's been set up in Central Park, and they're still taking, speaking of inbound, patients every hour. But let's be real here. This has taught us one very important lesson, that the world, and in many cases ourselves, have taken travel for granted. We thought nothing of jumping on a plane and going somewhere. We thought nothing of getting on a cruise and going somewhere. We were dealing with a world in which 1.4 billion people would have crossed an international border this year. What we've seen in the process of the coronavirus is a world turned upside down and inside out. The normal playbooks have been thrown out, and if they haven't been already, they should be. We are navigating in uncharted waters, but this much is true. And I'll start with this, and maybe I'll even close with this, but it's true. The one thing that hasn't changed, so much has, but the one thing that hasn't changed is that our cultural DNA means that we don't just want to travel. That's an easy one. We need to travel. And now the question is, coming out of this, it's not a question of whether we're going to travel or where we're going to travel, although that will have some impact. It's really a question of how we're going to travel and when. And those things are going to evolve not in a one-dimensional way. There's not going to be one green light where everybody says, okay, all clear, we get to go. It won't be done that way. It will be done by individual states or by individual regions. There'll be new rules in place. Sporting events and mass events of any kind, meetings and conventions, conferences, may be redefined as well. So keep in mind that even though we ground to a halt very quickly, we're not going to start up very quickly. It's going to be in niche, in markets that are specific, and where, remember, short of a vaccine, we don't have an all clear sign or an all green light, and we may not have one until we get a vaccine. So I want everybody to understand that this is not like, okay, let's go back to normal. There is no more normal. And so what we have to do is adjust to one overriding fact that we cannot get rid of. We have to address it. We have to not embrace it, but we have to adjust to it. And that's this. Let's go back to 9/11. People were scared of flying over large bodies of water because of terrorism, so they stayed home for a while. It didn't bounce back right away, but then it did. In those days, cruise lines were able to reposition their assets and literally move all their ships out of Europe and back to US ports ports in the United States that didn't even know they had ports suddenly had cruise ships. So the recovery was a little bit easier. This time around, it's going to be a lot more difficult because the one overriding worst four-letter word that starts with F when it comes to travel is fear. And you're dealing with it not in a regional area or in a particular market, you're dealing with it globally. And what we wanted after 9/11, now everybody wants. And what is that? Our security blanket. We want our blankie. And until we get that, until it's defined for us in a way that we're comfortable with it, we're not going to just jump on another plane or get on a cruise or take a tour. It's not going to happen that way. So we have to be able to now strategically think during this period of time, when we get those limited all clear signs, and it will not happen all at once, it'll be a rolling green light. When we get that, how do we now plan for it now so we can be ready to go when it happens later? I hope that gives you somewhat of an overview of where we are. And to give you an idea of how bad it is in the United States in terms of airlines, things are going to change. Today, for example, American Airlines finally dealt with reality and they canceled 90% of their domestic flights. The total number of operations out of LaGuardia today is 9. On a normal day on American Airlines, it's 170. In Kennedy today, the total number of operations is 3. United Airlines has done the exact same thing. Delta has parked planes so many places they had to close a runway at the airport in Atlanta just to house the planes on the ground. So that doesn't mean they're all going to come back with their entire fleet. In fact, they're going to retire a lot of their fleet. That's the one good thing coming out of this. They're getting rid of the real junk planes, the old 7.5s and the 7.6s, and those, for those people who fly Delta, the old MD-88s, they're going to say goodbye. But the reality is, every airline you can imagine, both here and overseas, is coming back smaller. It's going to come back with fewer routes, fewer frequencies, less capacity. And if the law of supply and demand kicks in, that means higher airfares. So that's just on the airline situation. On the cruise line situation, I'll throw that in. They truly have an obstacle that nobody else has. They're not going to get bailed out because there's no congressional support for companies that are not based in the United States and fly foreign flags. And other than the private sector, issuing bonds or buying their stock, which happened this morning in the case of Carnival, their ships are going to basically be at anchor, most of them for the rest of this year. The optics for the cruise line are very difficult right now. Can anybody tell me, within your own circle of friends and family, how many of your people are saying, I can't wait to go on a cruise? No, the optics are that they're scared. Here's the real fear of getting on a ship, having somebody cough and being quarantined for 3 weeks and being ship of fools and being unable to get home. That is a huge hill for the cruise lines to climb, or a huge wave, if you want to keep that symbolism alive, for them to get over. So they'll probably be the last to recover. Hotels, well, again, hotels that deal with meetings and conventions, take a look at the New York Hilton, about 40 blocks from where I am right now, they're closed. 80% of their business, meetings and conventions. Big hotels like the Marriott Marquis, you get the picture. But what nobody's really talking about is not the hotel companies. They're talking about them, the Marriotts, the Hiltons, the Hyatts, the Intercontinentals, the management firms, but they have very little equity in their hotels. So the people that you really have to worry about are the actual people or corporations that own the real estate, who own those hotels that can't maintain debt service. So what's going to happen? It's inevitable, folks. You're going to see consolidation and closures and failures. So 1/3 of the hotel numbers that we're used to seeing right now may not come back, or may not come back under the brands we recognize them as. So capacity issues there as well. For the travel agents who've been working without a revenue stream now for more than 2 months, who are doing amazing work, just working to keep their clients happy in terms of getting their refunds and rebooking them, and in many cases, bringing them home, they're going to need a bailout. Hopefully the SBA will help them. But in terms of coming back to the United States, inbound travel, coming to states and regions and theme parks and national parks, it's going to have to be done initially on a state-by-state basis, for the simple reason that not every state's coming back at the same time. And I'll stop right there at this point and answer some more questions if I can.
Thanks, Peter. That's really interesting. Do you have any idea what regions of the country or countries might be ready to travel to the United States first?
Well, regions outside the US are you talking about?
Yes.
Well, think about who came out first. It's the Chinese, it's the Koreans, and hopefully down the road, the Japanese. Very much a part of that, of course, would be the Hawaii market and the West Coast of the United States market. But remember, we're going to be dealing now with another fear, because remember, our president right now has made it very clear he didn't want the Chinese coming. And some people may call them racist, doesn't matter. The perception is we don't want them here. And all of a sudden, we're dealing with issues of liability. We're dealing with issues of people saying they don't want to go where those people are coming, not in a racial way, but because they were the first guys to contract the virus. And so you're going to have to deal with the basic infrastructure in those locations. I'll give you an example. Let's talk about restaurants. And let's say restaurants in Los Angeles near Disneyland, okay? How do restaurants get designed? Well, where do they put their bathrooms? Way in the back of the restaurant. The restaurants that are going to come back first are going to be the restaurants that reposition their bathrooms to the entrance of the restaurant, where they take your temperature before you go in. It's going to be things like that that will determine not only who comes back first, but where they go when they get here.
Wow, that will be a changed world, won't it?
It will.
We have another question, speaking of the fear, as people get back into traveling, from Kathleen Johnson, I believe is on the call. Her question is, will the high rate of cases in the US and our inadequate preparedness do lasting damage to our representation as a safe destination?
Well, here's the problem. The messaging from our government has not been good. It's been conflicted. It's been misleading in many cases. But at the state level, the messaging in many cases hasn't been. It's been very good. Our governor here in New York, our governor in California, governors in Indiana and Ohio have done a very, very good job of getting their arms around this and staying on point and speaking effectively and accurately to their citizens. So if you're talking about reputational damage to the United States, that's been in place for a while now. The real problem is, who speaks for us? And does it carry the weight that it needs to be carried in terms of accurate and credible information? And that may, in some cases, be a rhetorical question. I think we can't depend in this case on government to get us out of this mess in terms of messaging. We need the private sector with credible people who can speak for an industry, look, when something bad happens, with all due respect, the last person you want talking is the Minister of Tourism, because you expect that man or woman to say, everything's great, of course. Their job is to promote travel and tourism. That ain't gonna cut it now. You need somebody who is credible, influential, and believable to take the messaging and the facts that you need to know to the people who will be in a position to accept them. So the private sector has a huge role to play here, bigger than they've ever had before, because of the fact that the leadership hasn't been there in the government.
Interesting. We've had a few questions also about the business travel, the meetings and conventions market. How do you see that coming back? And that particular question came from Jordi Zaroka, who's on the phone as well.
Well, it will be back, and I'll give you one funny story. My wife said this to me the other day. She said, in 9 months, two things are going to happen. The birth rate's going to go up and the divorce rate's going to go up, because people have been forced to deal with each other. And I remember after 9/11, when we were grounded for 5 or 6 days, by the 6th day, wives were saying to their husbands and husbands were saying to their wives, don't you have a meeting to go to? Can't you just get out of here? So again, it goes back to our cultural DNA of wanting to have meetings. They will come back, but anybody who thinks that they're going to come back with a vengeance this year is a little delusional, because as you all know, meetings don't get planned 2 weeks in advance. Meetings get planned a year or 2 years in advance. And locations have to be booked and confirmed. A lot of things go into that most people don't realize or accept. They do now. So right now, to give you an idea of my schedule, every meeting that I was scheduled to go to for this year, with one exception, and I'm waiting for that to cancel any minute, has been canceled through November. I don't think I'm alone in this. I think all of us share that. So to get those back on track and to get those logistics in place is going to be somewhat difficult. I think what we really have to do is realistically deal with the fact that 2020 is our enforced, unanticipated gap year. It's our gap year. And you want business meetings to come back? Essential business travel will happen, guaranteed. People don't want to be cooped up. They want to do face-to-face. But if you're talking about big business meetings or even corporate retreats, until custody of care is established and a vaccine is on the market and that it's applied, my worry is that's not going to happen until next year.
Wow. Jordy's follow-up question to that was, and Jordy, you can certainly unmute yourself if you'd like to jump in, or put, if anybody has a question, put your question in the chat box and we'll be sure to get them answered as well. Do you think that DMCs, the destination management companies, are going to survive this, that are specialized in the MICE market?
Well, here's the thing that most American consumers don't get. If I stay at a hotel in New York, there's an occupancy tax, there's a room tax. And in most cities, that's what budgets and finances a lot of the DMCs. It's what finances local tourism operations and entities. So at a 17% tax here in New York, for a $200 a night room, that's $34 per person per night. That's revenue that's gone. And so how many of the destination organizations that I normally talk to are furloughing people, with many of them not expected to come back? They will survive. But remember, this is not trickle down at this point. This is tumble down. And the faster that the government can get those SBA loans funded, however, those SBA loans don't apply to the 501Cs right now. They have to come up with a new stimulus package in the next wave that hopefully the Congress is going to do to make sure they're covered. Because let's take a look at the chain here. If the DMCs aren't funded, they have no advertising and promotion budget. If they have advertising and no promotion budget, there's no co-op ads. If there are no co-op ads or even advertising to begin with, magazines and television stations have a problem because they're not getting any advertising revenue. It's a connectivity here that people haven't really worked to establish yet, but it's going to hit home pretty soon. I should tell you this, for those people who have applied for those SBA disaster loans or for the payroll protection plan, there are two separate functions here. You need to know the SBA is completely overwhelmed. They can't process anything. I talked yesterday to the president of one of the largest banks in the world, who told me that they had processed in one day $35 billion in loans. Sounds good, right? No, they haven't sent out a single check yet because they're still waiting for appropriate guidance from the SBA. And to put this in perspective, last year the SBA wrote out about $28 billion in loans for the entire year. They're being asked right now to basically process nearly $350 billion of loans in a week. How about this? Ain't gonna happen. So time is critical here. When you saw those unemployment figures last week and the week before being 3 million, last week being over 6 million, don't think for a minute it won't be just as high this week. Because in the travel sector, people don't realize that globally there are 75 million jobs at risk. In this country, it's millions of jobs that may have already disappeared, and only 2/3 of them may come back. So the answer to your question about the DMCs is that they're going to have to restructure with their own governments how they're financed, because if they keep the typical financing procedures and protocols in place, they're not going to get any money, not for a while.
Very interesting. We do have several questions coming in through the chat. Let's see, the first one here, a follow-up to Kathleen's earlier question. Who do you think will be considered credible spokespeople for destinations?
Well, it may not be anybody who is associated with the government or with the travel industry. How about people who live there? How about people who work there? How about people who depend on their entire livelihood from visitors? You know, we forget, and this is the serious one that doesn't really apply to the United States, but it does apply to the rest of the world. There are 93 countries out there that depend totally on travel and tourism for the bulk of their GDP and their foreign exchange. Now, you go to a country like Egypt or Tanzania or Kenya, I can go on and on, Indonesia, where there's no income and there's no revenue because nobody's on a plane, the airports are closed, there's nobody staying in the hotels, nobody's going on safari, and they literally cannot put food on the table. This is a situation where governments collapse. That's where you have civil disturbance and unrest. And they may not have the central banks that are as flexible or rich or flush with cash that we do in order to print all that additional money right now. So what you're going to need in terms of credible spokespeople, you need that safari guide in Kenya. You need the guy who's running the jungle cruise at Disneyland. You need the person who's basically bussing tables at a Chili's. to basically say, this is what's happening now, and we're ready. The message that should be coming now, not later, but now is, hey, we know you're not traveling now. We know you're not ready. We know we're not ready, but we're gonna be ready, and we can't wait for you to come. And by the way, we're all in this together. What else can you say at this point than that? But you don't want to hear it from elected officials. You don't want to hear it from spokespeople who work with the tourism industry, because that's what everybody's expecting. If you don't get down to the basic people, the people who may not have a lot of public contact, or you may not take, or you may take for granted, right? I mean, take a look at Hawaii right now. The overwhelming number of the people who work in Hawaii are holding down more than 2 jobs in the hospitality industry. Right now, there are no jobs in the hospitality industry. The hotels are closed. They don't have a plan B, and they've got kids to support and families to feed. I want to talk to the maid in Maui. I don't want to talk to the governor in Maui. And I want that maid in Maui to tell me, I'm going to take care of you. Come on back.
That is really interesting. I can't even
Lisa,
imagine.
can I ask you a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, please don't respond to everything I say by saying this is interesting, okay?
But it is. I can't help it. Okay, we have another comment here about public policy from Steve Richer. He says, thanks, Peter. Great analysis as always. Will this experience prompt public policy agencies to be more supportive of tourism promotion, or will it have to fight for crumbs from broke governmental organizations?
Well, let's go back to not to 9/11. Let's go back to the Icelandic volcano back in 2010. That was the real wake-up call for the world that, oh my God, everything stopped and my life can't go on the way it normally did, right? I couldn't get my fruits and vegetables. Heart transplant patients couldn't get their organs. I mean, the world stopped for 5 days. And guess what? That was the first time that governments realized, oh, maybe they have a point to make about the importance of travel and tourism, about what these GDP numbers mean. Remember this, and it is changing now, but it's not changing fast enough. You know, in the old days, when governments were formed, and you talk about public policy, the last cabinet official ever named was usually the Minister of Tourism, because it was a political appointee. Let's give this guy the job because he helped us in the campaign. He's the guy who can screw up the least. He can do the least amount of damage. Make him do that because who cares about tourism? Well, that's changing now. In so many countries around the world, with the exception maybe of ours, we don't have a cabinet minister of tourism, but in so many other countries, it's the second most important position after the Minister of Foreign Affairs, because he's the guy with the money, right? Because that's where the money's coming from. So the educational work that the World Travel and Tourism Council does, that the U.S. Travel Association does with Roger Dow, with the NTAs and everybody else, that has to ramp up now, because every one of our elected officials in this country realizes there's connectivity here, and it's not pretty when travel and tourism isn't there. I think they have a wake-up call now, because guess what? It's an election year, people are voting, and they have to vote their pocketbook, and which right now is pretty empty.
That's so true. We have
Well, that was better. You didn't say it was interesting.
Hey, there you go. See, I follow your lead. So we have a comment here from Robert Graff. It says, I have a canceled flight ticket on American Airlines. Should I claim my refund? They are also offering a 20% bonus voucher, yet I also hear they may run out of cash.
Okay, this is my most favorite question and my most unfavorite question. People don't realize this, and the airlines have not played straight. It's a rule from the Department of Transportation that if the airline cancels your flight, not you, but if the airline cancels the flight, you're entitled to a full refund, even on a non-refundable ticket, to the full amount that you paid back to the original form of payment. It's also a rule, not even a rule, it's also stated in many airlines' contract of carriage. It's even a European Union rule, but the airlines weren't playing fair. What they did was Lufthansa and a number of other foreign carriers actually blocked the application that travel agents were using to get refunds for their clients. They blocked it. All these other airlines, American, United, and Delta, initially were refusing to pay refunds on anything and offering you a voucher and then trying to increase the premium by giving you a bonus of anywhere from 10 to 25% and giving you up to 2 years to use it. The last time I looked, I wasn't a bank. I don't loan money to the airlines, right? Look, I don't trust the airlines as airlines most of the time. Why would I even trust them as banks or as lendees? So I reminded this of the airlines. I reminded this to everybody else. Last week, 9 US senators wrote to the US Department of Transportation, and guess what? Last Friday afternoon, just 3 days ago, the US DOT made a formal announcement reminding the airlines of the existing rule. And that not only did they have to offer refunds now, but if they gave you a voucher earlier because they wouldn't give you a refund and you asked, they'd have to cancel the voucher and give you the refund. Right now, it's in nobody's best interest to let the airlines hold your money with no interest for a year or two. Right now, the airlines are about to get a $58 billion bailout, of which $29 billion is going to give them the liquidity to do the right thing. We have a short memory when it comes to certain things. We have a long memory when it comes to not being treated fairly by the hospitality industry, including the airline business. So the answer to your question is, unless you plan on using the voucher in the next year and you don't care about your money and you want to take that little 10% bonus, go ahead. American Airlines is not going to cease operating, but they are going to come back as a smaller airline.
So while we're on the subject of airlines, Alfredo Gonzalez asks, airlines are flying with a couple of passengers in order to get the government support. Is that fair?
Actually, not true, although I've heard it before. People forget what the airlines did when they first got into business. Contracts with the United States government to haul the US mail. That's what the airlines have been doing. And they did that in good faith, if you will, to honor those contracts and then say to the government, we're not going to shut down, because that to the current government would send the wrong message, especially to a current government that did not issue a federal stay-at-home order. So the airlines continue to fly. But American Airlines' decision yesterday to cancel 90% of their domestic flights is an indication that they're not going to wait for the government stay-at-home order. They're going to deal with the reality, as Alfredo just said, of only 3. Look, American Airlines Flight 1 last week, which is their movie star premium flight from New York to LAX, went with 6 passengers. Talk about the unintended consequences of social distancing.
So what do you think will be some of the primary positive outcomes? This is from Daniel Schwartz, of this crisis, and more focus on sustainability or perhaps stronger domestic travel demand?
Well, it won't be by design, but remember what the 3 big words were before the coronavirus? It was over-tourism, sustainability, and, hot new destinations. Okay. Well, over-tourism has already been dealt with right now. Take a look at the environmental reports over China and over Italy. But it's been dealt with in the short term. Take a look about, environmental, same difference. Look at the water quality in Venice right now, right? Now you have an opportunity for local governments to seize control in the right way, not in a vindictive way, but in the right way to value their product of tourism. And since the airlines are going to cut back on capacity, it's a win-win situation to be able to not play the usual numbers game of what's the average visitor stay, what's the average visitor spend, and how many people are coming, but are they doing it in the right way? And can we all profit from it? And you know what? Prices are going to go up in the long run. In the short run, let me say about the playbook being thrown out, the travel industry cannot discount their way out of this. Because if they could, we'd all be on planes today. The airfare today from Fort Lauderdale to Los Angeles on American Airlines round trip is $28.
Wow.
Yeah, right? Now, nobody's jumping on the plane. And that doesn't mean that everybody's going to jump on the plane at the end of June when some people start getting a green light. So we're going to value it differently. We're going to value the experience differently. The prices may go up, but the experience will be improved.
So where do you think some of these upcoming short-term and mid-term opportunities might be in what sectors of the industry? And this is from Sandra Dasani.
Well, on the hotel level, they've already started doing things that are making some sense given their challenges right now. I got, I did a virtual tour the other day of the kitchen of a hotel with a chef who gave me all the recipes I wanted, right? And I actually, I might actually do it. Look, the key here is human connection. The key here is not losing sight of that, and that's so much part of the hospitality business. What we're doing right now, we're not doing out of desire, we're doing out of necessity, because if I had the opportunity, I'd much rather see all of you in person. But in lieu of that, we're having a conversation. And that's the word we've lost so much over the last 10 years, the art of the conversation. The people that are going to respond better and rebound faster are going to be the people who are keeping the conversation going right now. Look, talk about a captive audience. We're all at home, and we're reachable. It's not as if I got lots of stuff to go, places to go today, right? I mean, my biggest trip today was between the bedroom and my office, and I'm sure you all share the same excitement. So the bottom line is, you have an opportunity here, which you always had but didn't always use, to start and maintain a conversation, because at a certain point, the conversation hopefully will be in person.
Peter, you know what that is. It's really interesting that you say that. No, I'm kidding. But, we've talked about recovery, and so many conversations I've been in, people are really afraid to promote right now. They're,
Oh, they
afraid
shouldn't. They shouldn't. That's the worst thing you could do. Don't sell me anything. I'll throw it out. And so will every other consumer. We're smarter than that. We're not even thinking about that now. We're thinking about whether we can go outside for an hour and take a walk, right? Now, there's a difference between your dreams on hold or your dreams forgotten. Our dreams are on hold now. They're not forgotten. So talk about, you know what? Keep the dream alive. We're ready when you are. And if you want to talk about it, whenever you're ready, we'll be happy to tell you what we're doing. Not even now, but when we come back. Not if we come back, when we come back, and keep the conversation on those terms. The minute you try to sell, it's a recipe for disaster.
So keep the lines of communication open.
Yeah, but
And
don't
let them
tell
know
them
you're
about a
still
discount.
there.
Don't tell them about a deal. People aren't looking for deals now. They're looking for their security blanket.
Interesting. It truly is. So we have another question from Juan Sepulveda. It says, Mr. Greenberg, meeting contracts of the future should include a coronavirus pandemic clause and should be written by the DMC, which would be the management company, or corporate client, not the event place or hotel.
Well, he's got a point. I told you about the biggest source of my emails these days about people who can get a refund. You know what numero dos is? Insurance that people bought that is meaningless, right? Here's the problem, and they should be ashamed of themselves. Everybody here who makes their reservations online knows this already. You can't complete the transaction unless you opt in or out of that travel insurance. And it all says, peace of mind, get security, get your money back if something goes wrong. Really? Where's the insurance policy language on that same page? It's not. You have to go to page 20 of the website. And let's face it, nobody ever gets to page 20. But if you did, you'd find out that every travel insurance policy that's being sold today has an exclusion on pandemics. So everybody who bought insurance, it's worthless. If the travel industry wants to come back, not to mention the travel insurance companies, because they should be ashamed of themselves for not making that as part of a proactive disclosure, they want to come back and sell me insurance, raise the rates another $40, but put it in there. Put it in there, because otherwise I'm advising everybody, as a matter of consumer protection, do not buy the insurance. Do not. It's worthless. And as far as the DMCs writing the policy, you know what? There's got to be a way. Right now, there's a hotel in Miami called the Eden Rock. They were booked for a class trip from a school group in New York over right about now at a cost of $2.3 million for 610 rooms. The hotel is closed right now, right? Everything is closed. They won't return the deposit. They won't return the 50% they already put down, and they are insisting that they pay the full amount anyway. You know what? That's a declaration of war. How stupid are you? Are you that desperate for cash? You don't understand there's a future? And the deal is, if you don't do that, you know what? It becomes page one news, which I will be reporting on tomorrow, by the way. So here's the deal. Do the right thing. We understand you're desperate for cash, but you can't hide behind this stuff. Look, I always say to everybody, the worst word in any travel brochure, I want everybody to listen to this. It's not even a word, it's a symbol. You know what it is? It's the asterisk. And the asterisk is the acknowledgement of that travel provider that they are about to lie to you. It's an all-inclusive vacation. Asterisk, watch out. Here are the 95 things that are not included. Stop it. The best thing the travel industry can do, and adjust the rate appropriately, is to come back as an asterisk-free experience. And that applies to the experience itself and how you sell the travel insurance. You want people to get a security blanket? They'll pay for that. Give them that.
So back on along the lines of communication.
Lisa, that was interesting, by the way.
It was so interesting.
Okay.
I just didn't want to, get your head big or anything. But anyway, Jordy says, how do you keep your clients at peace and assuring them that you will be there after this crisis is over?
Well, the first thing is, if this is from a travel agent or a travel advisor,
Tour operator,
the
yes.
answer is you do qualify, at least in this country and maybe overseas as well, for the SBA, for that disaster loan. Because you guys have been working without a revenue stream since day one here, and you need the money. And so, first of all, you got to maintain the conversation. Number two, get in line right now. Don't be late to get that SBA loan. It's not the payroll protection plan. That's something else which you probably also qualify for if you're employing under 500 people. But the disaster loan, you can apply for up to $2 million. It's a loan. The first one is a grant that gets basically forgiven at the end of 10 weeks. But the SBA loan, you can have between 2 and 5 years to pay it back. It's a very low interest rate, and it's going to get you back. We all have to believe that travel is coming back. We also have to believe it's going to come back differently, and we have to adjust for it. But again, it doesn't matter what kind of SBA loan you have if you don't continue that conversation with your clients.
Peter Gabriel Martinez, he didn't think that comment was necessarily interesting about the asterisk free. He said it was profound that we as an industry should become asterisk free. So that's a new one. I like that.
That was interesting.
That was interesting. Okay. We have another comment here from Jeff Gayduck. What markets do you envision coming back first, and what's the quickest path to revenue?
Well, the markets that are going to come back first, you would expect, would be the gateway cities of, New York, LA, San Francisco, Orlando, Las Vegas. But again, they have the same challenges we just talked about. If they don't provide the security blanket, I mean, think about this. Right now, would you want, based on only what you know, in lieu of not having a vaccine, to go into a crowded casino? Right now, would you want to go to a sports stadium? Right now, would you want to go on the jungle ride at Disney World or Disneyland, right? I mean, I'd go on Pirates of the Caribbean any day of the week, but the point is, what's the mindset of the traveler? So unless your venues in individual locations, your attractions, your theme parks, your restaurants, your national parks for that matter, address this issue right away and work on it now, you won't be ready when they want to fly to New York, LA, San Francisco, or anywhere else. That, by the way, presents an opportunity for everybody else in the United States to be actually saying, we said asterisk free. Guess what? We are flu free. We are virus free. And the way we do that is, here's what we're doing to maintain the proper behavioral protocols, but at the same time, not diminishing your experience when you get here. There's a way to do it, but you got to get out of the mindset of number of visitor stays, how much they're spending. You got to start somewhere, because what's going to make you or break you at the end is word of mouth. And word of mouth today, no pun intended, is viral.
Can you speak more about restaurants, since we know once the virus does get kind of behind us here, everybody's going to be wanting to go out, get something to eat. Etty Scalia is in the dining and restaurant area and would like to know a little bit more about your thoughts on the restaurant business.
Well, let me split that. Everybody's going to want to go out. Not everybody's going to want to go out and eat out because of the individual design of those restaurants. Remember, it's foremost in our mind. And sadly enough, this SBA loan situation is not maybe going to move fast enough to save a lot of restaurants. We may see a lot of them not come back. So the restaurants that are going to survive, let alone succeed, are going to have to be physically redesigned. They're going to have to deal with spacing. As I said before, redesign where the bathrooms are. Take everybody's temperature when they walk in. It's going to be part of our routine now. All right? We're not going to be shaking a lot of hands. We're not going to be doing a lot of hugging. Right? The waiters may all be wearing rubber gloves. Right? And that, reminds me of too many bad jokes. But the point is, that's the new reality. So don't wait for the new reality. Get ready for it now. And understand what you can do with the design of your individual restaurants to make it a wonderful food experience, a great going out experience, but not one that's going to keep people from walking in because they're afraid there are too many people in there or you're sitting too close together. And one of the ways you can do that, and I know the restaurant business hates me when I say this, even in good times, I despise what I call the terrible twos. You know what a terrible two is? When you're there with somebody else, they put you at a table for two and you're sitting 18 inches away from somebody you don't want to hear their conversation, let alone smell their food, right? Get rid of all terrible twos. Make every table a table of four, encourage families to come together, and then spread them out.
That's great.
Remember,
So
no terrible twos.
no terrible twos. I love it. So that brings us to a question about consumer behavior that Chris Ellis sent in. Do you see, and I guess how do you see this will change people's travel habits once this is over, or do you think it'll go back to business as usual?
Anybody who thinks it's going to go back to business as usual is delusional. It's not. It can't. It can't. There are certain regions of the world that are somewhat new to travel, or new to group travel, or new to cruise travel, or new to adventure travel. But for the bulk of us who have traveled before, you know, we may have an airline now that guarantees you the middle seat free. The first airline that does that will fill the planes. Think about it, right? Because we all remember what the airline experience was only a month and a half ago. You were stuck in the center seat between the two sumo wrestlers. This is not a good idea, right? The first airplane that does that, or the first airline that does that, wins. They have to adjust the fares, but I guarantee you, you take that flight. The first hotel that basically shows you the process. Here's the biggest problem about the industry needs to do. Not the biggest, but one of the biggest. They don't involve us as consumers in the process. They only want to show us a beautiful room with the bedspread made, the roses on the pillow, and the size 0 breast enlarged model holding a glass of wine. Throw that out. What you need to do is show us how the maid cleans the room now. Show us how they prepare the bath, meaning clean the bathtub. Show us how they shampoo the carpet every night. Show us the process, because once you understand the process, then you really value the product now more than ever. This is the time, everybody, to encourage every hotel and resort to focus on what? Back of the house, 100%.
If anybody has a question, please put it in the chat and we'll make sure that Peter answers it. And so, Peter, where are you going to be going as soon as you are able to get out of that house?
Well, you may not know this, but I'm also a fireman here in New York.
Oh.
And so I'm on duty 3 days a week, 7 months a year. I should be out on duty today, but we've quarantined my location because it's got a high incidence of COVID-19 cases and deaths. So I will go out there the minute I get the green light, not from the state, not from the authorities, but from my fire chief. And I'll go out there and be on duty.
Wow. What else do you do?
Hey, I sit here and talk to you because it's interesting.
I love it. Anyone else have any questions? I think.
Can I say something?
Yes, please do.
If you do have questions when we're done, I'm going to give you my email. And by the way, I do a video report every day updating the news about this. You'll find it on the most imaginative named website in America, petergreenberg.com. And our newsletter is free. It's not transactional. It's informational. But I just posted a video about a half an hour ago or 45 minutes ago. I answer all the email questions there as well. And obviously, since travel is definitely front page news, we do this video report update every day.
Thank you. And could you also say a few words about your radio show on Saturday? Because that was really interesting too. People might want to.
Yes, for about the last 20 years, I do a 3-hour national radio show every week. It's called Eye on Travel. It's on CBS. Check your local listings. And we broadcast it from a different location in the world every week. I'm now broadcasting it from my bunker here in Manhattan. But we have, through technology, last week's show, we had Arnie Sorensen on from Marriott. We had Robert Crandall, the legendary former CEO of American Airlines. We had Tom Wolbert from Crystal Cruise Lines. This coming week, we've got Arnold Donald, the chairman of the CEO of Carnival, and a number of other people. Plus, we're answering all the emails. If you can't find it on your local stations, go to our website because we stream it live every Saturday morning from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time.
Yeah, it really is worth listening to. It's a very good show. Okay, we do have a couple more. Here's one near and dear to my heart. What role do you see for trade associations today and in the near future?
The first thing the trade associations have to do is to educate your elected officials, not as lobbyists, but as realists. Don't sell them anything. Don't promote anything. Right now, nobody really cares about your annual tulip festival, okay? I'm sorry, but they don't. Right now, they care about whether or not going to eat tomorrow night. But the only way they're going to eat tomorrow night is in many cases from the income received from visitors. And you need to help them connect the dots at the elected level. This is the one time politics should play no part in this. It's basic economy. That's what I would say.
Well, here's one where you can take a wild guess, or maybe you already know the answer, and that is in terms of market share of world travelers, who will fare worse, China, the US, or Italy and France?
Well, you know, it's an interesting thing about Italy. I believe one of the reasons why Italy and France are always on the number 1 and 2 lists of American travelers is because we're all failed art history majors. You know, we studied the painting in school, then we go to Paris, we stand in line for 11 hours at the Louvre and come out an hour later and go, it's so small. But there's a residual strength there that will come back. People really want to go there, and for good reason. However, remember, what's going to come back first is domestic travel first, and then within the United States. You have 48 continental US states that have a wonderful opportunity here. It's time to discover America, and for many of us, to rediscover America. So the US is going to come back first if, big if, each individual location doesn't promote itself, but presents itself as doing the right thing, being responsible, being sensitive, and not selling anything.
And do you think that rural America, and this is from JP Allen, rural tourism destinations will be likely to open sooner or be more attractive by chance?
Well, two-part question here, or a two-part answer. They may open sooner, but remember, people need to know something. Here's the subtext that nobody's discussing. One of the reasons why we quarantined my location at the fire station is where we were concerned about adequate connectivity to medical care. And where we are, a lot of it's going to be a medevac with a helicopter or a boat. So rural areas have to do what? Promote your connectivity to medical facilities. That's the subtext that nobody's thinking about, but they are thinking about it. They're just not talking about it. So if I want to go out to rural Arkansas, where I spent a lot of time, or rural Texas, where I spent a lot of time, I just need to know that if I have a problem, they got me covered.
So should DMOs, we were talking about their role in all of this, should they be working together to really help small business, such as tour operators and the business travel companies and attractions, to really get assistance from the federal government?
They should. Look, this is an educational process. If you'd asked me a month ago about my SBA loan, I would have gone, what? What's an SBA loan, right? Well, yes, we're all in this together. We need to go through it together. And I'm going to tell you this right now. I know I'm going to be right. Whatever that $2.2 trillion stimulus package was, it wasn't a stimulus package. It was a basic recovery package. Congress is going to have to come back to Washington and do another 2.2 to get ahead of this, because every one of these programs is going to be oversubscribed. That's how bad the damage is right now and how much the recovery needs to be. So yes, the DMOs working with the local tour operators, great idea, because we are all in this together. Strength in numbers here really does matter.
Chris Ellis asks, once travel commences, won't we see all countries trying to regain their market share and flood the consumer with marketing?
Exactly, which is why you don't want to do that. This is not a time to sell. A very simple message is, hey, we're great. You know we're great. When you're ready, call us. We're here. We're not going anywhere. And we're going to take care of you. We're going to give you your security blanket. That's it. Don't come out with deals or stay 4 nights and get the 5th night free. They're not even going to come for 1 night if they don't think that you've got that security blanket. And you don't sell it, you present it.
And I think we're coming up on the last question or so. And this is a doozy. When do you foresee us getting the green light to travel?
There's not going to be one green light, sorry. It's not. There are going to be multiple green lights in different areas and different times with different restrictions. We're all going to be tiptoeing. Nobody's jumping. Anybody who jumps is going to tiptoe right back. So we can't wait for somebody just to turn the light switch off. It's not like we just had a power failure, right? We're going to have to come back little by little. Now is the time. You've been given an opportunity to get your acts together, to be ready to go, but also don't think for a minute that tomorrow you're going to have 30,000 visitors when you had none today. Tomorrow you may have 3, but then they may tell 3 of their friends who tell 3 of their friends, and that's the kind of virus you want to spread. But bottom line right now is there is not going to be a green light before July 15th. of any sort. You may have in certain regions, like just what happened in China, you saw the pictures this morning, they're letting them out. I'll make you a bet it's too soon. I'll make you a bet it's too soon. So guys, now's the time for some patient thinking, some strategic thinking, and to understand the psyche of the traveler. They're not looking for a deal. They're not looking for a discount. They're looking, once again, for security because trust has been lost and confidence has been lost. And they're worried about their safety. You can deal with that, but deal with it proactively. You know it's already there, so don't ignore it. Talk about that. What can each entity do to provide that security blanket that's real, that's tangible, that people go, great, I'm going to go on that plane because they guaranteed me no one's going to sit next to me. Wow, it took a virus for the airlines to figure that out, right? Good. I don't care how they got there, get there.
Well, Peter, as always, you are so informative, and we so appreciate your time and expertise in this. Again, if anybody has any leftover questions, please send them to Peter at petergreenberg.com. Peter, any last few words?
No, I'm now going to go walk back to my bedroom. And I'm not going to get any miles for it.
Thank you so much. We always appreciate you.
You got it, guys. Thanks again.
Thanks, Peter.